Well, the same day that Cody and those two other kids got killed, that was, it's a day that we'll never forget. And I believe that the fires on that day were the biggest single fire event in U.S. history in terms of acres. Cody was killed in the Forge fire, and our ranch was just completely overrun in what was called the Perryton fire, which was 318,000 acres. And it was half the size of the one that was north of us in the Oklahoma Panhandle and southwestern Kansas. It was over 700,000, but the total acreage for that day, one day, was 1.2 million acres. And the same change of wind that caught those kids by surprise, they thought they were safe from that fire because it had been moving at a real fast clip behind a 50 to 70 mile an hour wind that was out of the west-southwest. The Perryton fire started on the ranch that joins me on the west. We're in the Canadian River Valley, south of Perryton and up the river west from Canadian. And a pumper called me about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I had just been up. We lived in a canyon, and we can't see smoke as well as we wanted to. So I had just gotten back from going out of the canyon up on top of the flats to scout for smoke, and I didn't see any. And it took me about 7 minutes to drive back to the house, and when I walked in the door, a pumper called and said, a man called and said there's a fire on Weta Wilson's place. And I don't know if it's true or not, but with this wind, you better check it. And so I walked outside and I saw the smoke. And that fire had been going 7 minutes, I guess. But already I could see a big cloud of smoke. I knew it was going to be bad. But I thought it was moving away from us. So I wasn't worried about that fire. I was worried about another power line that might have gone down somewhere else in that valley. We'd had a bad ice storm in January that we were out of power for 16 days. And there were 500 linemen from all over the United States trying to put the power system back together. So it had been devastated, and nobody had any idea how many transformers were going to blow up, how many lines were going to fall down and start a spark. I was scared that there would be a fire start to upwind from us and we couldn't get out of our canyon. There's no back door. So I told Chris, get your mandolin and your Mac, get a jacket, let's get out of here. And so we left with just that little few things. And I thought we'd be back by dark because I thought that fire would go past us, and if another fire didn't come from the southwest, we'd make it okay. But we went to Perryton, and at 6 o'clock, the wind changed to the north. And I told Chris, that's bad news for us. And that's the same wind change that those kids never thought they were in danger. But on a day like that, you're in danger unless you're sitting out in the middle of a plowed field. Because if the wind changes or if another electrical wire goes down with a 50, 60 mile an hour wind and 10% humidity, everything's on fire. There's no place safe. So that wind change turned the fire. It had gone 50 miles from the time I first saw it. It went all the way to the Oklahoma line. They were evacuating. They evacuated Higgins, Glacier, and Canadian was on the point of being evacuated because that fire was coming straight at Canadian, and they thought it was going to level every one of those towns. And so it took that fire down into our canyons, which hadn't been burned, I think, in probably 150 years. We had cedar forest down there, beautiful red cedar trees that were 40 feet high and this big around. And it got into the tops of those trees. In the mountains, they call that a crown fire. It never actually hits the ground. It just goes through the tops of those trees. And it went all the way to our house, and nothing left. My writing office, which was nearby, nothing left. The guest house where our kids came to stay when they visited, nothing left. So we were in the position of Job when he said, naked we come into the world and naked we'll leave it. And those trucks started showing up the next day with hay. We had no grass at all. We lost 90% of our grass. Miraculously, we didn't lose any cattle. How that happened, I don't know. The country east of us, around Canadian and Higgins and Glacier, they had tremendous death loss. 50% of herds got killed. You had mamas who wanted their babies to nurse because they had a tight bag, but their bags were burned so badly they couldn't stand the pain. You had calves that were starving, cows that were blind, hairless. It was an unspeakable tragedy. I was hearing about it on the radio as I was trying to feed our cattle, and I was so glad we were spared from that. But those trailer loads of hay started showing up for us too. And I don't know how they got my name. I would get a call on my cell phone saying, I'm so-and-so, I'm in Canadian, I've got two trailer loads of hay, how do I get to your place? So they came and they dumped them out. One day I got a call from a guy in Canadian. I gave him directions. He came out and dumped his hay, and I said, oh, he had a 12-year-old son with him. I said, where did you guys come from? How did you get my name? He said, this boy's been reading Hank books since he was 6 years old. He heard that you got burned out and he wanted to bring Hank some hay. So, and they came from southern Louisiana. That's a 13-hour drive, he told me. That's pretty nice.